get to, is it Kari Hunter or Kari? Kari, come on down to the table, thank you.
I can take my mask off, right?
Yes, you can.
Otherwise my glasses fog, so thank you. Tēnā koutou Mayor and councillors. The science is irrefutable and globally agreed to stop the climate crisis from becoming a permanent catastrophe. We must limit global
Sorry,
warming.
I'm going to have to...
Do I need to move myself?
maybe if you moved onto one of the other seats...
This has got an X. Is that where I'm supposed to sit or where I'm not supposed to
yeah,
sit?
that'll do. That'll be fine. And then sort of head towards the mic. Yeah, that's right. That's great.
Try that. Start from the beginning?
Yeah, thank you.
Tēnā koutou Mayor, councillors. The science is irrefutable and globally agreed to stop the climate crisis from becoming a permanent catastrophe. We must limit global heating to 1.5 degrees Celsius. That's been said by many, but recently Antonio Guterres, UN Secretary General. Our scientists are telling us that there is still a chance that we might be able to do this, but that this year is a crucial one. That means we can't wait for the next long-term plan to do what's needed in an emergency. Emissions must peak and be falling within a couple of years, be down to 45% globally by 2030, to zero by 2050 to give us a chance. Faster cuts would give us a better chance. Ōtautahi will not be spared the consequences of overshooting this, and others are already dying of climate change in large numbers. As a city with high emissions, historically and currently on a per capita basis, we have both a responsibility and a possibility of acting more quickly. 50% cut this decade would be in the right direction. I'm pleased to see this target, but 80% would better reflect climate justice. Our current LTP and this draft annual plan are not compatible with the 50% target this decade. If climate change doesn't get us as a species, ecosystem collapse could, and if we don't turn this around, and we also need to ensure that all of us in Ōtautahi have healthy, safe housing. This too is an urgent crisis. The changes we need to make will affect nearly everything we do. We need you as councillors to ensure every council decision, every policy, every dollar of funding is aligned with a plan to get to at least 50% emissions reductions this decade and down to zero in 3 decades, and to serve the basic well-being of everyone. Change is hard, but maybe also exciting. We need you, challenging as it may be, to lead these changes with the urgency and scale needed to meet the reality of the crisis. Even if you too, along with many of us, struggle to keep the reality of the crisis in mind and to remember in every decision that the way we're doing things can't continue. We're often the beneficiaries, and sometimes not so much beneficiaries, of decisions that were made more than 100 years ago. The decisions you make now will affect people more than 100 years into the future, and we need you to keep them in mind as well. Change is coming. Let's have planned changes for everyone's good, not just a series of catastrophic changes as climate impacts escalate. Where's my other bit of paper? There's a great deal that Ōtautahi, led by council decisions, can do, some of it quite quickly. I'm going to pick out a couple of areas, but they're not the only ones. Local transport is in some ways amongst our lowest hanging fruit. Christchurch is a mostly flat city with wide roads. We need to stop prioritising car and truck driving over all the less harmful modes. Instead, we need to make planning and funding for future sustainable travel higher priority. We need to transform this decade to a transport system that's safe, accessible and effective, that allows most of us to get where we need most of the time without a car or truck. The future, as I see it, is made up largely of active and low-powered travel, low-emissions public transport, and a small number of electric cars and trucks, mainly emergency vehicles, some trades vehicles, access for people with mobility constraints, maybe parents of infants, and a much smaller portion of freight as we reorient to a more local economy. We need you to reallocate road space and create barriers to keep active and low-powered travellers safe everywhere in the city. You're off to a good start with some excellent cycleways. However, it's important to get safe routes in place everywhere very quickly and with less cost and money and emissions. This can be done. Rather than thinking of the good routes you have already built as expensive cycleways, I encourage you to see them as expensive ways to enable ongoing high motor traffic. If we don't prioritise mass motor traffic, there's plenty of room on most roads to reallocate a lane for safe cycling, etc. Cycles are great, but they don't fill every need. I expect if the infrastructure and economy supported it, there would be people here in Ōtautahi and Aotearoa who could design and make practical, low-powered and human-powered vehicles that could be helpful to people with mobility impairments, could move large objects across suburbs, could keep the weather out without relying on internal combustion engines, high balance skills or super fitness. Maybe even practical low-powered public transport. My expectation is that if we can get a clear signal, if we all get a clear signal that cars and trucks are going to be largely phased out beginning very soon, necessity will drive some excellent invention. But at least some form of seed funding for this kind of development would make sense to get it going quicker. My hunch is that engineering solutions to current barriers to progress could make quite a difference. So part of that was encourage you to actually buy those kinds of vehicles to help get things going. Council-owned companies are another area that is really in need of change. We, through you, the council, largely own the Christchurch Airport and Littleton Port. Council-owned companies need to not just reduce their own direct emissions, although that would be good, but also the emissions they enable by the services they provide. The coal that goes through our ports and the mass tourism that goes through our airport are killing people, and some of the people that they kill will be people in Ōtautahi. So we need them to make a plan now to be reducing those emissions. That'll affect the economy, and we need to plan for it because it's necessary, even though it's difficult. So there's a lot more to do, and there's more I could say, but this is vital work. So I encourage you to lead rather than waiting until there's full demand for everything, because it needs to happen quickly. So kia kaha. Thank you.
Kia ora. Thank you very much for your submission. I think we've come to the end of the scheduled time for the submission, so thank you very much. Food for thought.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think the property